I remember the day vividly. The day that I came face to face with the terrifying reality of being trapped deep within the bowels of the earth. It was a caving trip, a daring adventure into the unknown, fueled by curiosity and a thirst for exploration. Little did I know that this journey would test my courage and resilience in ways that I could never have imagined. Equipped with a helmet, a headlamp, and a sense of adventure, I descended into the dark abyss of the cave. The initial excitement tingled through my veins as I navigated the labyrinthine tunnels, each step taking me further into the belly of the earth. The sound of dripping water echoed ominously in the shadows, and the cold, damp air sent a shiver down my spine. As I ventured deeper into the subterranean world, the walls closed in, squeezing the passage into a narrow crevice. The ceiling threatened to scrape my helmet, and the floor became treacherously uneven. The very walls seemed to shift and move as if the cave itself were alive, taunting me with its ancient secrets. In my quest to push the boundaries of exploration, I found myself crawling through a particularly tight squeeze, an ominous passage that seemed to narrow with each inch that I advanced. Panic stirred in my chest as I realized that I had misjudged the dimensions of the tunnel. The rock pressed against my body, restricting my movements and stealing my breath. I fought against the mounting panic, struggling to control the rising fear. Beads of sweat trickled down my face, mixing with the dirt that clung to my skin. The seconds stretched into an agonizing eternity as I wriggled and contorted, desperate to free myself from the suffocating grip of the cave. But the rocks were unyielding, unrelenting in their embrace. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out the sound of my own shallow breathing. Each movement, each attempt to free myself, only seemed to wed me further into the confining tunnel. Fear gnawed at the edges of my sanity as I contemplated the unimaginable. A life trapped within the earth, my existence reduced to a mere footnote. The darkness closed in around me, the isolation and the weight of the rocks pressing down on my body like a tomb. With my mind racing, I summoned every ounce of strength and determination. I wriggled and twisted. I pushed against the unyielding walls, my body aching with the effort. Inch by agonizing inch, I managed to free myself from the vice-like grip of the rocks, the adrenaline coursing through my veins like a surge of electricity. Trembling with exhaustion and relief, I lay on the cave floor, the coolness of the stone seeping into my weary bones. Tears of gratitude mingled with the sweat on my face as I contemplated the narrowness of my escape. The cave had tested me, pushed me to the very limits of my physical and mental endurance. But as I emerged from the depths of the cave, gasping for the fresh air that caressed my face, I knew that this experience would forever alter my perception of exploration. The earth, with all of its hidden mysteries, demanded respect and caution. It had shown me its terrifying power, the potential for entrapment and loss. From that day forward, I approached every caving expedition with a newfound humility, understanding the fine line between adventure and danger. The memory of that narrow passage would forever haunt my dreams, a chilling reminder of the fragility of life and the immense power of the Earth's underworld. This happened years ago when I was barely 14. My middle school and the middle school of my best friend at a time organized a trip abroad to Great Britain, London to be exact. It was supposed to be a few days looking at London architecture, museums, and shops. It was fun until it wasn't. For the day before we were supposed to leave and go home, we were brought to the streets with some interesting shops. and we received free time to go check them out and shop. And then our teachers and guide had a brilliant idea. They told us that after the time allotted for shopping ended, that we would have to meet at a different street than where we were at. In retrospect, it was like 100 meters away, but they decided to do it anyway. Most of us had never been to London, and barely any of us spoke English. We didn't have a map of the city, and the roaming services on our phones didn't work correctly. About 90% of all students got lost, including myself and my best friend, because we went in the complete opposite direction. We were both confused about the directions that we were given. We were walking along the sidewalk. My friend was running ahead and I was staying behind to nervously look around. We didn't really like where we were at, and we were kind of too nervous to interact with anybody to ask for directions. I guess this is why it happened. My friend again had run ahead and stopped to look around. All of a sudden, I saw a black car approach from behind and match my speed. I started to feel like I was in a movie. It was broad daylight and there were a lot of people around, so nobody really reacted. I was confused and I didn't know what was happening. And then from the car stepped a man and said, "You're nice. Why don't you come with me?" And he tried to grab me. The car was still running, so I suppose somebody was driving as well. I was stunned and I couldn't believe what was happening. But at that moment, my friend ran back from behind, grabbed a hold of me and dragged me away from the man. We took off as quickly as we could, in fear that the car would follow us. After some time, we finally decided to stop, and my friend nervously started crying and shaking me and screaming why I didn't move when the man had tried to catch me. I explained that I was like a deer in headlights. We cooled down and we managed to ask some people for help, and we were soon found by our teachers. We didn't tell anybody what had happened. I mean, we were sure that nobody would really believe us. After the whole trip, when we got back, I told my parents, and I was never allowed to go on an organized trip by my school again. My mom considered it all really unprofessional and irresponsible. But hey, I'm just glad that I'm here to tell this story. About a year ago, I spent a decent amount of time working in a different city than I currently live in. One day was very cold and the Airbnb that I had booked was pretty far away. I didn't have a car and had failed to pack a warm coat. I ducked into the Kmart nearby to buy something that I could wear on my walk, with the intention of returning it the following morning. My best option was this enormous XXL fuzzy bathrobe. My walk home led me through this beautiful botanic garden along a waterway. It was nearing midnight and I was halfway through my journey. I'm usually quite aware when I'm out, especially at night, but I had let my guard down a bit, due in part to the enormous bathrobe that I had wrapped around me. It was like wearing a fuzzy suit of armor. Suddenly, I felt intensely uncomfortable. I couldn't quite put my finger on what I had heard, but my immediate thought was a couple of males holding a whispered conversation. I rounded a corner and ducked into some trees, sucking my breath in and straining to understand what I was hearing. Light footsteps, voices. Two men neared my hiding spot in the path, and I internally berated myself for not being more careful. Nobody was out, so screaming would do nothing. I'm a very small female, so this situation was one of my worst nightmares. As they passed, I heard, "She's around here somewhere." I felt physically sick, until one of the guys let out a low whistle, and I heard the jingle of a collar, a dog scurrying past my spot, and a good girl followed by smoochy noises. An intense sense of relief followed. They were talking about their beloved dog, not hunting me. They seemed harmless, endearing even. I readjusted my bathrobe to cover my head. It was that cold out, and I popped out from the trees. I didn't realize until later that I looked at myself in the mirror, that the bathrobe arms were now on top of my head, sticking out like some grotesque, bulbous monster appendages. I also didn't realize that the men had stopped, or were walking very slowly, only a few meters ahead on the path. One of the men screamed in terror when they saw my emergence from the trees. The other swore loudly, and they both took off running across the bridge over the waterway, followed closely by their dog who was now barking frantically. I still have the picture that I took of myself in the mirror after the incident, and I get the giggles every time I see it. I must admit, it was a rush to finally be on the other end of a situation like this. A couple of years ago, I flew home to visit family. I would be there for about a week, and then we would head to the coast for a week, and then back home for another week. I totally needed this break. I had just ended an on-again, off-again relationship. Like seriously, one day on and the next off. It took 7 months of putting up with it because you're supposed to fight for what is important to you, right? Anyhow, I finally just said that it was done. No more chances, no trying to work it out, just done. So with that chapter of my life being over, I was more than happy to be somewhere else, surrounded by family, and begin putting myself back together. Got there, spent a couple of days sleeping a lot. My mother's a nurse and she was becoming concerned that there was something physically wrong with me. I just needed a couple days in a safe place, where I could let my brain work on digesting the new life I would have when I got back home. So, before we left for the coast, I met up with a friend from grade school that I had kept in contact with over the years. I thought it would just be he and I, but it didn't really faze me that another person was there. We hung out for a while and then I needed to head home because I had to take a backwoods route to get home, or take a different route that would add another 20 miles onto my track. Being backwoods, I needed to be able to keep an eye out for deer. So I said goodbye and told my friend's friend that if he was ever in my neck of the woods, look me up and we would grab a drink and hang out. I told him to grab my number from my friend and out the door that I went. About halfway home, I get this weird, queasy feeling in the pit of my stomach. So I slowed way down and sure enough, there is a deer in the middle of the road. Because I had slowed down, I could see another car out on the road. I couldn't shake the queasy feeling, so I figured it would be better to cut off and go down the main road, because there were more places to stop. I seriously didn't want to stop in some rural farmer's driveway. I've watched too many movies to make that mistake. So, I get over to the main road and pull into a gas station, and I sit there for a couple of minutes, trying not to get sick to my stomach. I ran into the store, grabbed some water and ginger ale, and came back out to my vehicle, still unable to shake that queasy feeling. So, I started to head home from the gas station and knew I didn't want to go straight home. So, I drove around, taking this road or that road, until that weird feeling started to go away. And then I went home, read for a bit, and then went to sleep. Next day, everything was fine and we headed off to the coast. Fast forward 2 weeks. The trip is over and I'm still feeling a little bit fragile over the breakup, but that's all. I figured I would begin the process of cleansing the environment of negative energies, and then work through the baggage that came from the breakup. I knew there was a lot and that it would take time. So the next day, I'm going about my business and everything as cool as can be, when picking through the junk left behind after a breakup. I'm really just doing mindless things to zone out and not to have to think too much on the activity, since my brain was working full-time already. A little bit later in the day, my phone rings. I don't get a lot of calls, so I assumed that there might be a family emergency, and that I needed to answer it ASAP. The area code of the caller, who is not in my contacts, is the same as my cousin, so I answered without a second thought. On the other end was my friend's friend, S.A., the acquaintance that I met at my friend's house. It's a little weird to have him be calling me, but I'm not thinking that anything is terribly out of the ordinary. I asked him what was up and he said that he was at the airport. I still find it a little odd but say, "Oh, that's cool. Where are you going?" He said that he had already landed. Again, I'm distracted and really just want to get him off the phone so I could go back to my mental sidestep and zone out while my brain chugged away. So I said that I hoped that he had a good time wherever he was. He said that he needed me to pick him up. "What? Did you say you needed me to pick you up?" "Yeah," he replied. "I came to visit you." I paused there for a second. I know for a fact that I didn't show any more interest in him than general courtesy. Even the tossed over the shoulder look me up comment was one of those polite things to say because you never actually plan on seeing them again. "Why did you come to visit me?" I asked. He said that he felt a deep connection and wanted to be with me. I'm starting to get angry as well as freaked out at this stage. I told him that I didn't feel the connection at all, and couldn't believe that he would fly across country to see someone that he had spent maybe 2 hours with. He said that I had invited him when I said to look him up. I said, "No, I don't think so. That's just a polite thing to say to some random person that has made a very small impression on me." He said that he needed to find a way back home then since I had misled him. Misled him? What the heck? "Look me up if you're ever in my neck of the woods" had led him to think that was the basis for any sort of encounter that was meaningful. He said that he needed a place to stay until he could get the money for a plane ticket back. I said that there were more than enough hotels that he could stay at while he got himself sorted out. He said that he didn't have any money after buying the random one-way plane ticket. So at this stage, I'm flabbergasted angry and freaked out that someone would do that on a one-way ticket. I finally caved and said that he could stay the night while he sorted everything out, but I expected him to be gone no later than the morning of the day after tomorrow. So I bring him to my place, throw pillows and a blanket on the couch and turn to head to my bedroom, and he asks if he can sleep with me. I'm like, no. No way that's going to happen. So I point out that I have firearms and do not attempt to come in. The next day, I have to work, so I woke him up and told him to get up and find a way home immediately. I also told him that I had to work, but I would check in on his progress because the next morning, I was dropping him off at the airport regardless of whether or not he had a way back. I went to work and he blew up my phone all day. Wanted me to come back to my place for lunch. Told him that I couldn't and that I was way too busy. I finally got home from work and I'm chuckling at a text that I got about my dog. And that's when I noticed that he had rearranged everything. And by everything, I mean every room of the house had been rearranged. I flipped my lid. I asked him why he thought it was normal to do anything that he did. Instead of answering, he asked me who I had been talking to. I said that it really wasn't any of his business, but I had received a text from the guy watching my dog while I was on vacation. Color me shocked when he says that he doesn't want me to talk to that guy. I'm no longer freaked, but full force apocalyptic disaster is about to be unleashed and leave nothing but a smoking crater. The temperature drops about 10 degrees and I very calmly said to get his stuff and I was calling a cab to take him to the airport because he's a complete psycho. Side note, full rage had been achieved when it feels like the temperature drops and I speak very calmly. If I'm complaining about something, it's a quick burn. If I go monotone calm and tilt my head to one side slightly, that's where I hit Arctic level anger. So, he unaware of the environmental change that has occurred, and that the chances of survival are dropping by the second, decides to tell me that he used my computer, and got my ex's phone number and they both agree that I was just heartless. We're fast approaching the epic scale disaster and he finally seems to notice how deep into rage I had sunk. I told him it was unlikely that he had gotten into my computer, because it's a full quote of a part of The Art of War by Sun Tzu, and that he would have had to have been the processing power of the Hadron Collider computers, and it was obvious that that was not the case. I told him that he had 3 minutes to get his stuff and get out, or I wouldn't be responsible for what would occur. So, still yelling insults at me, he gathered his stuff up and he left. I used to get calls and texts from him. I would block one and 6 more would pop up, but it eventually stopped. To this day, I have no idea, nor interest in knowing where he's at or if he made it back.